Aloha Hawaii, this is Pokalai Nui, and the time now is 35 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. It is Sunday, the 14th day of October. We have been talking about what's been appearing in the news. First, we started out with rail and a comparison between the Cayetano and the Caldwell proposals. Not much of that, just to note that the comparison is found in the Star Advertiser this morning, and then went into an editorial by Richard Barreca talking about the cost for rail, and somebody better start taking a look at these costs and asking that the city council start answering for it. And moving, whenever you talk about rail in Honolulu, you got to talk about the iwi kupuna, or the bones that have been at the present time the reason for the major stopping of the rail project from continuing, and the cost increasing to $114 million as a result of the recent Supreme Court decision that yes, indeed, the appropriate process was not followed, and pushing it all back, stopping the rail construction, and saying go back and do your what do you call it, archaeological surveys first, as is required by law. Why in the world did the politicians decide that they were going to push through rail without, or begin the construction of rail without the archaeological digs being completed? If the law is clear, what was the motivation? We can talk about different individuals going along with it and sort of skimping or skipping over the legal requirement. But what was the motivation behind it? Was it to rush the project so that you can at least confirm certain contracts, and once getting the contracts in, you can begin the project and say that we are committed, the train has already left the station, and there's no turning back now? And is this what was the motivation behind it? That there were some, or the other motivation that there are certain funds that we need to tap into, and in order to convince those funders, the funders being from the federal government and the Dan Inouye folks, what we need to do is go ahead, sign the agreement, sign the notice to proceed, let's begin the building of the rail, and we'll figure out the problems or the later problems later on, but let's commit the funds for it and then move ahead. Was that the basis of this kind of planning? And is this something that should be looked at more firmly by the city council? What happened to the folks in the city council to have given this approval? Or were they just led by the council chair? Or were they just led by the mayor to go ahead with this? I think there's a lot of, what do you call it? A lot of areas that one can place the blame for, and I don't think that people should get away scot-free without having to answer for their complicity in this kind of poor planning. With regards to the iwi, the bones, people can always try to come up with an excuse, but we had no idea that there were bones there, and so we shouldn't be faulted. We just wanted to get the rail going as quickly as possible. But that in itself is the fault. That in itself is the basis. You should have known, you should have explored, you should have done your archaeological digs first before moving ahead. So I think it's a very good lesson that well, hopefully people will pick up from this lesson. Here's another article that comes into the Star Advertiser, and this all comes from the editorial page on this morning, this Sunday morning paper. The third article, and so it just shows that there are many people writing about these issues. This person says, my mother, who was 100% Hawaiian, grew up on the Big Island and moved to Oahu before World War II. Going back to the past, my mother always spoke of Hawaiians living in Waikiki, Kaka'ako, and Ala Moana. It does not surprise me one bit that during major construction in the Kaka'ako area and Ala Moana area, kupuna iwi or human remains are being located. It was a natural process that they buried their loved ones where they lived. Local government and developers in the past have not displayed much cultural sensitivity to the Hawaiian remains. They dug up thousands of remains and paved over historic sites for roads, highways, condos, private homes, and parking lots. An issue is being made because of the rail coming through Kaka'ako and Ala Moana area. The government and developers failed to do what is right since the building boom of the 1980s. Larry Tamashiro from downtown Honolulu. Okay, so you have these various views. If you would like to share your view on all of this matter, I know we have discussed it numerous times, and some would say, yes, Poka, we've discussed it ad nauseum. But I'll give you another chance to discuss it if you are interested. If not, you can turn the radio off, I guess, or call in and tell me what other subject you would like to talk about other than rail or bus. You know, what about the issue of bus? Is that any better an alternative than rail? Well, at least you would do away with so much concern about the iwi kupuna. But it would be all surface. Even with rail, it's still surface, but you got to go down to build the infrastructure to provide the support for your elevated rail. With bus, not as much, and it's closer, I guess, to the surface or using much of what we already have. So Cayetano's proposal seems to be, at least for the unforeseeable cost, it would be far less than what the rail system is proposing. So we'll see. If you want to explain your position or disagree with anything that I had suggested or read, the telephone number here is 524-1080. We'll give you a chance to have your opinion shared with us, and we'll move from there. You know, there's other issues that also are going on. You have election of other public officials beside for the mayor's race. With regards to Hirono and Lingo, Lingo has been beating Hirono in terms of donations received. However, the most recent report shows that Hirono has raised $1.2 million from late July to September. Lingo only $822,000 during that particular period. But it doesn't show much if you just look at the numbers. What Lingo said was that she was going to raise over this campaign period up to from $8 to $10 million, and much of that money would be coming from outside of Hawaii. I don't think she's come close to that amount. And initially, when the Republican Party had seen that this would be a race between Lingo and Hirono for the Senate, and because the Senate was in such great play that they needed to get every opportunity that they could to grab a Senate seat. But more recently, what the polls are showing is that Hirono is extending her lead, or her lead is in at least the double digits above Linda Lingo's, and so there's this sense that Lingo will lose the Hawaii race, especially, I guess, with wisdom that Hirono has taken of tying their race to the presidential race, and suggesting that she is in there to help Obama, associated with Obama, and knowing that the Hawaii audience or the Hawaii public will be strong Obama supporters as opposed to Romney. From all indications, that's where it's at. So Hirono naturally attaches Lingo to Romney as Lingo tries to disassociate herself from the Romney ticket, disassociate herself from the Republican Party as much as possible, claiming to be working bipartisan and trying to get people from different places here in Hawaii to join her in her campaign. I would venture to suggest that Mazie Hirono will probably be our next senator from Hawaii, replacing Daniel Akaka. Okay. If you have any contrary opinion, you're welcome to call. Even if you share my opinion, our telephone number here is 524-1080. 524-1080 will put you on the radio and see what you have to say. Now, other than politics, are there any local issues that seem to be bugging you that you would like to talk about? Of course, there's a University of Hawaii fiasco, and what is occurring at the University of Hawaii with the president of the university, and it's very interesting to see how the focus switches from place to place. Previously, it was it Donovan, and I forget the name of the other person at a lower level who actually made a commitment for the what was that? The Stevie Wonder. What did we call it? Concert. For the Stevie Wonder concert. But moving from that, now the focus seems to be on, what's her name? The head of the university, is it Greenwood? Yeah, and as we focus on Greenwood, it seems that whoever is supposed to be overseeing that other person, the focus now turns to that overseer. So people are now looking at the Board of Regents itself for its failure to oversee Greenwood and for Greenwood's failure to oversee the athletic director, I think it was, yeah? Wasn't it the athletic director? Okay. So it continues to unravel, and each time you fire a person, it costs the university a huge amount of money, which people really don't give appropriate attention to accounting for. And so another group is saying, enough already, stop firing people. Maybe the ones who should be fired are right at the top. It should be the members of the Board of Trustees. What is that university board called? Whatever they are called. And perhaps they should be fired. Start at the very top, and then let's see how it all flows down. So we'll see what comes out of that. Okay. Turning to international issues, what we have is the war in Afghanistan. One writer says, and this is Garrett Porter, who I have a lot of faith in his reporting. He says that the U.S. is quietly, or has quietly, lost the IED war in Afghanistan. IED is the what is it called? The improvised explosive devices war in Afghanistan. I'm going to read just the first paragraph. He says, and this is datelined October 9 out of Washington, D.C., I'm receiving it through the Interpress service, the English version of it. Although the surge of, quote, insider attacks on U.S. NATO forces has dominated coverage of the war in Afghanistan in 2012. An even more important story has been quietly unfolding: the U.S. loss of the pivotal war on improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, to the Taliban. Some new outlets have published stories this year suggesting that the U.S. military was making, quote, progress against the Taliban IED war. But those stories fail to provide the broadest context for seasonal trends or had a narrow focus on U.S. fatalities. The bigger reality is that the U.S. troops' surge could not reverse the very steep increase in IED attacks and attendant casualties that the Taliban began in 2009 and which continued through 2011. So what Porter is essentially saying is that you recall the two generals, McChrystal and General David Petraeus, and what they were saying was that we're going to ramp up our response to the Taliban. We're going to get these the troops off of their vehicles and have them walk the grounds and meet with the people. And if we can take the hearts of the people, then we can take them away from the Taliban. And this is how the war is going to be carried out. And so we're going to put them on the ground, get them outside of the vehicles, and have them walk the streets and look for the IEDs and the rest. Well, what it did was actually become bait for the sharks. What happened was, as they had their troops walking the streets, it made more troops available for killing by the IEDs by the Taliban. And this is exactly what has happened. So the increase in casualties has soared by the IED killing of American troops in Afghanistan over the last 2 years. And it is something that seems to be unstoppable. The United States forces, both the U.S. forces as well as NATO forces, are losing that aspect of the war because they simply cannot control the IEDs that are placed on the road. Now, what McChrystal and previously Petraeus was trying to do is win the hearts of the people, get them to squeal on the Taliban. Who are the Taliban? Who are the people of Afghanistan? Well, they just happen to be one and the same people. Not all of them are Talibans, but many of them are, and they are not turning in their neighbors or their family members or others. So the United States is finding again that it is losing this attempt to overpower by simply flushing through its military personnel, and as they do that, they simply offer up these personnel to further injuries and death by IEDs. Something not generally known. We are told that the war is being won. We are sending more troops, or we had sent more troops in. There was a surge, and now that that surge has been successful, it's time that we withdraw. Not only is that happening, but other people are also withdrawing at the same time. The so-called coalition of the willing, or those people who have gathered together and joined with the Americans, have been removing their troops from Afghanistan, just as they started removing their troops before the Americans started removing theirs out of Iraq. And so you find the same process being taken in Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan has been a fiasco. The United States will, as they finally remove the troops, the United States will lose that war, a war that they had no justification in bringing about in the first place. They had no justification for winning, and there was actually no winning of the war. It was an internal matter that should be settled within Afghanistan, and as you deal between Afghanistan and the United States, it should have been left to the international rules that were already set up to deal with this kind of stuff, such as following rules of extradition, in which you would extradite a person that you were looking for out of Afghanistan, and if you could not, you were supposed to support the country to try to achieve the extradition. But to say that I'm going to create a war by going into that country and getting that individual myself is a violation of international law. Instead, what did they do? They went into Pakistan. He was not in Afghanistan. They had to invade Pakistan and create this discord with Pakistan just to get one individual. And it becomes a very popular campaign message. But it was a violation of international law, and the reverberations, the repercussions will be over a long period of time between the Middle East and the United States. So I would suggest that the wars committed by the Bush during the Bush era are going to be wars of big mistake, wars of major losses, and unfortunately most of those losses will be on the side of the countries that had been attacked, and they will continue to carry this injury, this pain, and the trauma that will last into several generations into the future. And by that injury, that trauma, the United States will be diminished through other attacks, through the continued hatred for the United States because of the conduct by the United States. So this kind of long-range foresight or planning has not been done by the Americans. And now what are they doing? They're rattling the same chain with regards to, well, now let's attack Iraq. That's the most foolish thing to even talk about. There's no evidence that Iraq is planning or is close to the preparation of nuclear weapons. All of the reports say that they have stopped that preparation back, when was that? About 10 years ago, was it? The United Nations have reported on it, the IAEA has reported on it, and yet because of the continual saber rattling by certain politicians, especially those out of Israel, for political purposes, wanting to create another war in Iraq and then push the United States into that war. The United States does not have that intestinal fortitude to resist that kind of being pushed into another war, and this is the situation that we face. In the meantime, we continue to expend so much of our funds for purposes of war making, and as a result deprive the other needs of the society from those funds. Okay, that's my opinion. If you would like to call and share another opinion, don't do it right now. We're going to go to music.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaiian, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pi'ilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'aku me ke one o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Ho'ohui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka.